Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now today I'm in one of my favorite places to hang out and film. This is kind of one of my little getaways. I've filmed here a bunch in the past and I thought it would be a great opportunity to get out here today and do a little bit more filming. Now with that said, I'm not just out here to film. More importantly, I'm actually out here to practice. It's not quite freezing today, but it is a cold and raw day, very wet, kind of gross and nasty. And I actually thought it would be a great opportunity to go through a couple of interesting setups. Now the one I'm going to talk to you about today is setting up my winter hammock kit. I have been working on it, tweaking it, and kind of refining it. And at this point, I think it's a real good opportunity to get out here and see what it's going to be like to get it set up and whether or not I think it'll be a viable option. Now, I take it very seriously when I set up my gear to really practice in the outdoor environment first. The last thing you want to do is get out to your destination on a trip where you're really relying on your equipment to keep you safe, especially when it gets to be this time of year. It might be nice in the daytime, but night the temperatures always drop off. It becomes very difficult to work, not only sleeping and being comfortable in that regard, but actually setting up your gear and setting up your kit. It's really important to keep in mind that your dexterity is going to be limited, either between your inability to effectively use your fingers when your hands are really cold, or maybe you're wearing gloves or something like that. So practicing in the outdoor environment in the exact type of situation where you're going to be using your kit is definitely helpful. Now with that said, I have a ton of work to do. I have my entire kit to set up here. I have it in my bag and we're going to get going. But before we do me a favor, stay tuned. So at this point I have all my gear in my bag. This bag here is the Helicon Tex Summit backpack, which I have been greatly enjoying. Now, as I mentioned, it is a little bit damp out here today, and I am using down. So, in that regard, it is something I need to be a little bit mindful of. So I'm going to take some of my equipment, set it aside, and then I'm going to get myself my tarp set up over top. I'm going to use this tree here and this tree over here for a ridge line. I'm going to get that set up, and that way at least I can proceed and hopefully keep dry. So at this point I have my ridge line set up. You'll see it around the tree here and then spanning all the way across to this side. Now I did use a hammock strap to help me with some additional length. Because I know this area, I did realize that I wasn't going to have enough length on my ridge line to make it from this one tree to the other. If I was going on an actual camping trip and someplace I was not familiar with, I'd either need a strap or even paracord, something like that, just to make sure that if I had to extend my ridge line, I absolutely could. Now there are some products that are going to be very integral to my setup. In this particular case, I'm using a bunch of equipment from 2Go Systems. Now the reason why I use 2Go Systems gear is because at this point I very much believe in it. Brian from 2Go Systems, the owner, is very innovative. He's coming out with a number of products that are multi-purpose and multi-use, and for me it's something that I definitely buy into. A bulk of the gear that I have today is 2Go Systems, and I'm using it in this environment to again test it and try it before I get out into the real world situation. So here I have a trifecta. This is the trifecta version 3.0. Now there are more than one size. This is the XL, there is the normal size, and there is a brand new trifecta coming out soon with a different material. So Brian experiments with proprietary materials and coatings on the inside of his tarps and shelter systems in order to give you reflective properties, and that's what this is today. So my goal is to use this Trifecta XL as the outside shell of my shelter to keep me dry, so I'm using it essentially as a tarp. Now there are technically 2Go Systems tarp systems out there. I just wanted to get a little bit of practice with these Trifectas to see how it would work. Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless, bringing to you today the Outer Limitless exclusive collection, bringing my followers and supporters high quality, limited, short run products covering many different genres and functions. If you are a follower or supporter of Outer Limitless, there's no better way to help out than to get yourself a piece of high quality, affordable gear from the exclusive collection. So the Trifecta is essentially a bivy shelter system that can be unzipped. Basically, I'm going to unzip this, get it completely straightened out, and use it up over the top as a canopy. Now, a couple things I can tell you: this trifecta is made of olefin, which is basically a Tyvek material, so it doesn't have the same tensile strength as like a nylon or a polysil tarp. So I need to be a little careful on my tension. I'm not going to overdo it, but at least at this point, I'm kind of seeing what the overall coverage of this is going to be. And the other thing is, I can tell at this point that the overall length of this is a little undersized for what I would be comfortable with if it was going to be raining overnight in a hammock. So I think I'm going to go with this on a diagonal to help to span the length a little bit more. So at this point, I have the Trifecta XL set up as essentially a tarp, and I feel very confident in its overall ability to keep me dry. You'll notice that by going in the sort of triangular direction here, I do very much increase the overall length of coverage, which is awesome for a wintertime shelter or something where you're going to have definitely adverse conditions. Now, I've done a good job at keeping it high enough that for now I can walk under here, work under here, and get my hammock set up with ease, continue to work on my shelter system, get it the way I want, and then at the end, if I need to lower this down to help me with a little more wind protection, I certainly can. Now, for my actual hammock, I have opted to go with the Sea to Summit Ultra Light Hammock. This is the XL version. There are more than one version, basically two. This is the extra large version, and I got it in gray. Now, when you look real close at this, it is a ridiculously fine, almost mesh. It's like as light a ripstop as you can get. Now, you may be saying, well, isn't this wintertime or deep fall? Isn't it going to be cold? Well, bottom line is, for me, the way I look at it is, the hammock itself is not really going to do all too much in the way of giving you protection. Is it going to cut down on wind a little bit? Yeah, sure. However, I am relying on my 2Go Systems products, both to cut down on the wind and provide warmth and insulation. So the hammock to me is really just a thing to lay in. It's the rest of the system that's going to provide me with my shelter properties, both the ability to keep dry, but also be nice and warm and comfortable. Now, with that said, the reason why I opted for this is when you really squash this down, this thing is like super, super tiny. I could keep going and squash this right down. It is basically smaller than the size of a baseball, and it is ridiculously light at like 4.5 ounces. This thing is ridiculously light. So with that said, it gives me the opportunity to carry more gear with warmth and with actual thermal properties. So that for me was a trade-off I had to make. Lose some weight and lose some bulk with the hammock to gain the overall properties that you get from some of the other gear. So here's the Sea to Summit Ultralight Hammock. You'll see here it is in the gray color, which is quite nice. Very, very see-through. Again, this is like the finest sort of ripstop material I could even imagine. So extremely light. Now, I do have some actual Sea to Summit straps coming, the ultralight straps. I just have not received them yet. So for this purpose, I've used basically just a standard webbing strap, a little half-ass carabiner with some paracord here, which I'm hoping is just going to hold me up for the time being. Now, I wouldn't trust this long-term or overnight if I was really trying to be safe out here and stay warm, but for now, where I'm practicing and just kind of hopping in here and checking it out, I don't see this being too much of a problem. So at this point, I'm just going to test this, sit in it real quick, and hopefully I won't end up on my ass. Getting the right height is always key. And for me, this is just about perfect, where I can still kind of touch the ground, but my butt's not going to be dragging. Getting the right height and pitch is also key. So you can see here, I have a lot of material behind me, kind of high up, and then it's very low on this end, so I need to do a little bit to level this out, but I think this should work pretty well. Now, the next key component for me is my under quilt setup. This is the 2Go Systems Therm. Now there's the Therm and the Shift quilt. I have both of them, and I bought both of them. Actually, I bought most of the gear that you see today for the main reason that I really want to support 2Go Systems. I trust in their equipment. I trust it to keep me safe, and in that regard, it's worth it for me to buy it and support 2Go Systems as a brand. So I have bought the bulk of this gear, but thanks to Brian for providing me with this Trifecta XL. Basically, I'm going to set this up right now as a pod system. This Therm can be used a number of different ways. It can be an underquilt, sleeping bag, just simply an overquilt. A pod system is really where I think it's going to be the most useful for me. Now, I want to see how tight it's going to be and what it feels like to be in there, what the overall thermal properties are. So I'm going to get this set up real quick, and then we'll take a look. So at this point, I have this Therm on my hammock, basically creating a pod system. Now it was quite easy to do so because this is essentially a quilt. You unzip the top, you lay it over, you zip it back together, and at that point there are some drawstrings and cinches. So taking a look at it here, you do end up with these shock cords that easily connect in a number of places. So 2 here, and then on the other side 2 here, which is great, helps to keep it centered and positioned. And then there are drawstrings at the head end and foot end to pull this tight together. So at this point, this looks to be pretty well secured, and I'm not sure if it's long enough for me, but I think I'm gonna kick my shoes off real quick, climb in and see how it is. So just unzipping this here, I will access it this way, get in the hammock, and let's give it a shot. So just being careful here to make sure that I actually get in the hammock itself. I think I want to undo this Velcro so it's not tugging there, and then I'll work that up around me afterwards. So just going easy, settling in, kick off my boots. Voila. So just sliding in here ever so carefully. The good thing I can see already is that this Therm definitely seems to be plenty long, which is awesome, and also plenty wide. So getting in here, zipping this up, actually it zips up reasonably easy, so that's a good thing. And then as I work this here, tuck it up over my shoulders. So already, just right away, I can definitely say I can feel the heat starting to build in here. Now, I do need to be careful with my feet. I don't know if you can see my toes there, but if I wasn't careful, my feet would just barely stick out the end. Now, I'd probably need some down booties or something like that to really combat the cold. I could see that being a problem at the end of the night, really, with my feet eventually cooling off. But the good thing is, this is long enough. If I'm careful, I think I should be able to really carefully position myself pretty much centered in this and have no problem. So at this point, I'm quite encouraged at how warm this is, even just in a minute starting to feel. I can definitely feel my body heat sort of building in here, and if I'm careful and get this tucked up around my shoulders, I can see me having no problem at all. So there's definitely plenty of shoulder room, which is good. And now at this point, I've slid down and my feet are completely in here. I got my face pretty much to the point where it just kind of pops out and I can keep my condensation going out to the atmosphere. So generally speaking, this is pretty nice. Now whether or not it's going to be warm enough for a 0-degree day, I guess I don't really know, but it certainly works for a day like today. Nice and toasty in here. So generally speaking, this is going to be nice and warm, I can say for sure. this is nice and toasty warm. Now, I may need something additional. I brought some other gear with me to help to supplement in case it's a really cold situation. Chances are, to be honest with you, I probably would bring the supplemental gear with me just to be safe, especially on one of those really cold and sort of stormy nights. Sometimes you get stuck out there and you don't necessarily know what to expect. So for me, I'd rather be a little bit safe, have some extra gear than to be sorry and not have it. So covering some of the supplemental equipment here, I have the 2Go Systems Shift Hybrid Quilt, which is another beautiful offering from 2Go Systems. I very much like this, and at this point, I very much trust it. This for me is kind of my go-to bag at this point, whether it's summertime or the middle of the fall or something like that. It doesn't matter. I use this pretty much as an open kind of quilt versus a sleeping bag, but you do have the ability to use this as an underquilt, a top quilt, a sleeping bag, or a cocoon. So to have some additional nice lightweight down with me in a really cold situation is definitely a bonus. Now let's say I just wanted to cut down on the wind a little bit more. I do also have my standard size trifecta version 3. So this for me is something that you could use underneath your hammock to create a wind block. For me, what I would do is essentially use this as almost like a cocoon system on the outside of the actual underquilt in an effort to block some more wind, help maintain my overall body heat, provide a little extra sort of thermal barrier, and then I would take my actual top tarp, bring it nice down low, and kind of wrap everything up. And in that regard, I think this would work pretty well. And then beyond all that, I have found that I really enjoy a sleeping pad in my hammock. It does a couple of things. One is it gives you that nice sort of cradle, helps to kind of even things out a little bit, gives you some pockets where the down or insulation in your sleeping bag actually can be more helpful, more effective by not being squashed down against your back and the hammock beneath you. And then the other thing it does is kind of helps to spread out the hammock material. Now for me, I typically use a pad with a pillow, so that gives me something for my head. But beyond that, I also have a couple of extra pillows with me for a couple of reasons. One, obviously for my head, but the other is I like to put them beneath my knees. It gives me a better night's sleep, helps me kind of cradle my knees a little bit so I don't end up with gaps beneath them and just a little bit of awkwardness. Now at this point, I would like to practice just a little bit getting that standard size trifecta underneath this in the event that I did need to use it. So worth practicing now, figuring out how I would tie it all together, how I would actually get in and out of the shelter, and just gives me a little extra practice while I'm out here today enjoying my time in the woods. So this looks just a touch messy, however, I think I found a reasonably effective way to use the standard size trifecta as a windbreak. So let's just say it was a really nasty, blustery night and I wanted a little extra protection, maybe some actual protection from side wind or any side blown rain. This potentially could work pretty well. So what I've done is use some bungee straps here to connect to my ridge line. Got this trifecta underneath my overall cocoon system and the hammock. I left one side open here for my ability to still climb in. Now with the shock cord, it has enough give that it's not really tugging or anything substantial on the fabric. I could see maybe this having a hard time, but I'm hoping that it won't. So I'm going to attempt to get in here, get myself into this cocoon, and see if this would add some additional protection if I really needed it. And that is kind of the luxury of 2Go Systems, the idea that their equipment can be used as improvised shelters, gives you flexibility. You kind of need to use your imagination sometimes, but in my opinion, that's kind of what's cool. So sliding in here, generally no problem. Just kind of positioning myself to get myself better centered in the hammock. That seems to work out pretty well. Now if I can get the quilt zipped up here, I'll be in better shape. So working the zipper on the quilt, that should work pretty well. Now if I had to, once I'm in, this side I may not have quite enough fabric to make it work. So I may really only have protection on maybe my most vulnerable side, but I would be certainly happy to have this sort of aiding in my well-being than to not have it at all. So not only do I have my therm, but I also have my shift quilt. So if I needed some real significant warmth here, I would have no problem. This is going to be almost too much. Definitely helps with my feet though. This feels pretty good. I have general coverage over my entire body, even with the trifecta. So with that trifecta XL over the top, again, it could come down even lower, and if I wasn't filming, I'd drop down the far wing, make sure that was nice and low. With the regular size trifecta as a windbreak underneath me, this therm quilt as a cocoon keeping me nice and toasty, and then if I need to, I could even slide inside the shift quilt, and that would be one ridiculous system. So at this point, there's really only one thing left to do, and that's veg out and enjoy my time in here. I mean, I spent this time setting this thing up. It's getting actually colder as we speak. Temperature's just dropping off, and it's starting to get cold. So I'm going to enjoy my time in here for a little bit. Maybe do a little bit of reading and just hang out for a little bit. So alright guys, there you have it. A quick look at my winter hammock setup with some different modularity. Now, do I need all this? No. Will I necessarily bring all of this? No, but I want to know what options I have. It gives me some versatility and flexibility, different environments, different wet, maybe it's not wet, maybe it's wind driven, maybe it's not, maybe I need heavy insulation, maybe I don't, maybe it's sub-zero. Well, at that point, I know I have a system that will be adaptable to any one of those scenarios, and that's the goal of me coming out and practicing today. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.